Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here. We're doing today's webinar on how to stop overthinking and how to ride with more fluidity, with more ease, more in sync with your horse. So dropping the mental checklist of all the position things that you've been told or been taught, and really finding that feeling of connected riding. And that's what I want to discuss today is what does that feel like? What are some of the things that we can do to get there? We're going to do really practical exercises, but we're also going to talk about some key concepts. So to kick us off, I would love to know for everyone that is joining in live, and even later for those of you watching the recording, put it in the comments. What kind of discipline do you ride? Do you ride dressage, Western, trail, hunter jumper? Let me know what kind of discipline you ride. I love seeing who's in the group. I always love the diversity that we get in these meetings together. And I also want to assure everyone that's coming in that what we're talking about today, including the specific positional exercises, are going to be applicable to everyone. And I have two stories that I want to share that will really relate to what we're going to discuss today. And the first one is about perfection. So a few years ago, I was at a saddle seat competition. Who here has ridden saddle seat or has watched saddle seat riding? It can be a very different style, right? So saddle seat is often what they show gaited horses, and this was specifically a gaited horse show. It was a show of Rocky Mountain and Kentucky Mountain horses. I had quite a few horses of that breed when I was growing up. So we're at this show, and there was one gentleman in particular whose riding style really caught my eye because he had, I think you would call it maybe a bit of a flamboyant riding style. It was definitely not positionally correct, um, but he was the best rider that I saw at that show. And I'll tell you some of the things he was doing. So he was a large gentleman, and he would ride with his head really forward, with his back very rounded, with his hands abnormally high in the air. Those that have watched Saddle Seat know that they tend to have their hands high, but this gentleman was abnormally high. So picture this very large man going around on these relatively small gaited horses with this position. And at first glance, it would look like, ooh, what a poor rider. But if you really watched him, he was in balance. So his body might not have been in good alignment, but he was very aware of his body. He was able to stay in balance, and there was nothing in his body that was blocked. So there was nothing that was tight that was blocking the movement. And this may at first seem to be a contradiction for what we're talking about today, because I'm going to be sharing different principles of alignment that help us to ride more connected and to not get blocked in our movement. So how was this gentleman able to be such an effective rider in this case, even though he had such kind of quote unquote poor position? And that's what I want to kick us off with, because the core of good riding is something that is more than just our position. They're very often closely related. I would say in 95% of cases, they're closely related, but they're not always. And when we can get this first piece, it is the true foundation for anything that we do in our riding. So what was it? What was it about this gentleman, and what have I felt for myself on my good riding days versus my not so good, and seen across disciplines with really great riders? This gentleman was in touch with his body, and he was breathing. He was soft. You could tell that when he was there in the ring, he was completely present with his horse. You could just feel it when he would go by. So when we breathe, the way that we breathe will affect everything else in our body. And not only is it affecting our nervous system, and whether our nervous system is going up or going down, we did a webinar 2 weeks ago on polyvagal theory, but there's so many muscular connections to our rib cage, going from as we breathe, it affects really the movement of our entire body. So this gentleman, by being really, really present and being very calm, he was able to ride really well despite this poor position. Now, if we took him and put him on a jumper or put him out galloping across the field somewhere, would that position, that physical position of his body, have served him very well in those situations? Probably not. But my guess is that he was in tune enough, he would have been able to make the adjustments that he needed to make, and it might not have been the prettiest picture, but when we saw him, you would have had that same sense that I did, that he was riding really well and he was in tune with his horse. So that's really the foundation of what I want you to remember of everything today. And I think I probably, in the first 5 minutes, gave you what I most want you to get. So I hope that you stay to the end, because we've got three main things to talk about here. We've got a special opportunity at the end. We're going to look at some videos together, but that's the main thing I want to share with you, is that fundamentally, the way that we breathe and the way that we're thinking and feeling when we ride is the most important thing. So we've got a lot of comments coming in. Great to see everyone here. Amazing. Welcome. Welcome everyone that's tuning in. So I want you to think to a learning time for you, a moment where you had a breakthrough, you had an aha moment in your riding. And what was it that created that aha for you? Was it something that was said? Was it a feeling that you got? Was it a different instructor that explained something a certain way? Was it seeing it? So I remember one of my biggest aha moments riding was with who has been one of my greatest riding and especially teaching mentors, which is Wendy Murdoch. Who here knows Wendy Murdoch, has maybe taken her courses through horse class or ridden with her in clinics? Wendy Murdoch, for those that aren't familiar with her, is an excellent international clinician. And Wendy brings together a really diverse background of being an expert in anatomy and the movement of the body. And she's come into that from her own experience of having a very severe riding accident where she broke her pelvis in her 20s, and rehabbed, basically did her own rehab, because the level of support that was available at that time was very limited. So she did her own rehab to bring herself back into normal function and into riding. She also studied with the Feldenkrais method, and with some of the original teachers in that method that had worked directly with Dr. Mashi Feldenkrais himself. So she brings that to the riding. And she has a very strong background in the number of people she's worked with. Linda Tellington Jones, for example. I could go on with the skills that Wendy brings. But my first clinic with Wendy was at a local stable. I didn't really know who she was at the time, but I saw that there was a clinic coming up with her. I had just attended a clinic with another rider at this stable, and I knew that they brought in really interesting people. So I thought, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to ride with Wendy. And I came to the clinic. I brought my mare, Molly. Some of you may remember Molly from the videos. She's the big bay Holsteiner mare. We have another Molly who's a gray. So we had a gray Molly and we had bay Molly. So this is bay Molly that I'm referring to. So Bay Molly was given to me because she had a very independent streak, and she was jumping out of any fence that her current owner would put her in. So she was being quite the problem maker, because she would jump out, she would jump in with other horses, she would get them all fired up and running around, and then she would jump back out of their field. So she was given to me. And and Molly had such a big personality. She also would tend a little bit to anxiety when being ridden. And I'd worked with Molly for a few years, but we were still struggling with the canter. She would tend to get hollow in the canter and rush. And to be honest, I didn't even come into the clinic with Wendy specifically wanting to work on that. I came in just open of, this is a new instructor. Let's see what we get out of it. And in the first few moments, Wendy had us warm up a little bit, walk, trot, a little bit of canter. And then we came in and Wendy did some exercises helping me feel how to organize my chest in a different way. And we're going to do a little bit of this later in the webinar today so that you can feel this too. So when she did this little change and I reorganized the way that I was holding my chest, which changed my back, which of course changed my pelvis, my seat in the saddle. And then she said, just go out and pick up a canter. And she told me, don't think about it. Don't try to think about what you're doing or think about how you're feeling. Just go pick up the canter. And I remember we stepped out. I asked for a canter. Molly did a beautiful walk to canter transition, which was something that we usually did not get without a big leap into canter or, several hurried trot steps. So she did a beautiful transition and she had the softest, most floating canter that I had ever felt with Molly. And it really helped me understand that day the effect that we have on our horses. Because to be honest, I had been more focused on Molly's training about this canter thing. I was doing exercises for her to help her relax, to help her be stronger in her hind end, to, all of the things to try to improve her canter. And that moment made me realize when I just changed that little tiny thing about how I was sitting and how I was moving and carrying my own body, it allowed her to move so much more fluidly. So I know some of you have mentioned some learning moments in here, and I hope that you're reflecting on those because it's one of the keys that we're going to get to as we come through here is when we can recognize those real aha moments for us, the lesson that they taught us, and also how we arrived at that. It really can help us set ourselves up to be better in our riding. So I am just going to scroll the comments here. Carol makes a really good point. When watching hunter jumper shows and noticing the poor riding position of some highly successful professional riders, I wonder how they can be so successful. And I think this is the thing. When we watch horse shows, I will often go to a horse show, and especially if it's a judged event, I'm not looking at the winning rider as being the best rider. I'm looking at the riders and seeing which rider to me gives me the best feeling as I watch them. Because there's some competitions, and hunter jumper, speaking very in general, can be guilty of this, is that there's trends that are scored highly, even though they don't necessarily reflect good, effective riding. And sometimes in judge competition, it allows more for the trends to kind of continue and to win over what's really effective. And that's definitely been true in the hunter jumper world. So yeah, it's really interesting to go to competitions and just look for, who's really the rider that looks fluid as they go around, that gives you that feeling that you just want to watch them. Okay, so I want to Sally's cat is communicating here too. I wish I could translate it. So let me just pull up my slides for today because I have some images, some pictures, some things that I want to go through together here. Okay, let me back this up and share from the beginning because I want to first look at this picture that I have as the front. I think this should do it. The front. This is Harriet. This is one of our students that came to the farm campus for many of the events. And I love this image because this image actually was at a Wendy Murdoch clinic. And if you're wondering, a lot of what I'm going to share today are lessons that I learned from Wendy. So I love to give credit to my teachers. Wendy has had a huge influence, positive influence on my writing and teaching. And these things that I'm sharing are the core essence is what I learned from Wendy, and then you'll hear some of my kind of translation or some of my exercises that I've also brought to them. But I love this image because this image to me shows a really beautiful moment of connected riding between horse and rider. So if we look here, we can see that the rider's back is stable but soft. So it can just look here at the back. We can see, even though this is an image, we can see that the movement as Carly, this is one of our school horses, Carly, as she steps up here, we can just see how what we talked about last week. The hind leg steps under, creates the force, comes up through the back, reaching out through the neck. That allows the rider's pelvis to opening this angle at the hip joint, allowing the thigh to go slightly down. That gives that knees forward and down, and that's what keeps the lower leg stable. We can also see that there's a really nice line here from where the rein makes contact with the bit up to Harriet's elbow, and we can see that her shoulders are soft and she's looking forward. So just in an image, this gives a really nice, soft, connected image. So the problem that is just part of how a lot of riding instruction currently is where we're told things like heels down or sit tall or keep your hands steady. Put a yes in the chat if you've been told those things. We're told these certain things, but there's usually not a clear interpretation of how to do them. So that means that they can be interpreted different ways from different riders. And oftentimes the rider is then left trying really hard. So, okay, I'm supposed to do this heels down thing. So if I'm not feeling stable enough, it means that my heels must not be down low enough. So I push harder. And heels down, a lot of the instructors here at Horse Class talk about this. I talk about it a lot. It still is the most common error that I see. Even, we had videos sent in for today, and it's still the most common error that I see. But it's not just because of being told heels down and thinking that that's what we need to do, really of interpreting it in an incorrect way. It's also how we move. It's also kind of a key movement pattern that we have as humans that are walking around on two legs. So we're going to talk about that. So what a lot of riding instruction lacks is not explaining the why, not really teaching the body awareness or how to feel correct movement. And then this can lead to that tension. So this image has nothing to do really with today's presentation, although I hope that by the end you actually feel a bit like this, that you want to take a nice breath and soften a bit in how you hold and move your body, and that you can take that feeling to your riding. But specifically, we're going to go through 3 concepts along with the exercises that you can apply probably even to things outside of riding. So the first one of these is riding is feeling. So when we learn to ride, a lot of it may start out being just verbal instruction. The instructor tells us what to do. We watch other riders and we try to interpret from that. And then we have the input of what we're feeling, but that input, even from the movement of the horse, may not be the best input. So in classical riding training, I mentioned in last week's webinar that I had the opportunity a few years ago to go with Patrick King and study with some of his teachers in Portugal. And Wendy was actually on that trip as well. And when we went there, it was really fascinating to see how they were starting their young and beginning riders. And they would start them completely on the lunge line. The horse was often in side reins, and side reins have a really bad reputation because they're often used incorrectly. If side reins are introduced and used very correctly by a truly skilled handler, they can be a useful tool. They're not something just to slap on a horse, but if they're used correctly in this sense, they can be really useful because what was happening is that the instructor was maintaining the horse in a really good, healthy biomechanical movement. So that starting rider was feeling from the beginning, and they didn't have their reins at this point, so they weren't allowed to mess with the horse. They were just learning the movement, and they were learning really correct movement from the beginning. And many of us don't have that opportunity. We learn to ride on school horses. I had a riding school for 13 years. We struggled with the same thing. We didn't get to that point where we had the classical masters and we're teaching in this way. We would do versions of it, but certainly not to the purity of what I saw in this school in Portugal. But when we ride and we start with just hearing instruction and we're not necessarily feeling good movement from the beginning, we don't really have that feeling in our body to know what we're looking for. Because when we can have like a dart on a map of, okay, this is the feeling I'm looking for, then we can start to take it into different movements. Okay, I'm riding different horses, a bigger moving horse, a quicker, more responsive horse, but I know this feeling that I'm looking for. Or I'm going up into bigger gaits, going from trot to canter, etc., learning to jump, but I know this balance centered feeling that I'm looking for. So it's really key to get that at even just sitting first. And that's what Wendy's doing here in this picture. Because a lot of, well, I already mentioned that to me, good riding starts with breathing. And it starts with that awareness and being really present. That affects the position of our pelvis. And that's the first key to a good seat, is that our pelvis is in balance and that we've got a aligned and soft back. Now, I say aligned, it's about weight. I know we have many riders in our community that have a degree of scoliosis, to varying degrees, that have had injuries. I've myself now had multiple back injuries, and it's something that I'm working towards being more aligned in terms of just my own body symmetry. But it's being able to align our weight, even if our symmetry is not 100%. No one, horse or person, is really 100% symmetrical. And we might get closer to it, and then life happens, and then, we work closer to it again. So once we have this foundation of breathing, pelvis, then we want to start going down to the legs. Now, this is when we're kind of starting out from zero, if you will. But when we have a habit in place, such as bracing our feet against the stirrups, pushing for heels down, that can get in the way. And the first thing to focus on is changing that pattern. So now we're going into why I titled this webinar the way I did, of how to stop having a checklist of, okay, I need to check my pelvis, and oh yeah, that's right, I got to breathe, and okay, how's my back? All right, where's my leg position? Oh, hands above the withers. Instead of repeating that again and again, because normally when that happens, you adjust one area and something else kind of comes out. So instead of doing that, you can focus on the one thing for you that may be blocking the movement. And we're going to look now at two videos where we can see this example for heels down. Okay, I'm going to play this. Let me know if you can see it. I can pull up an actual file too, but it should be able to play okay in this PowerPoint. Okay, so I want you to just watch the movement for a bit before I start talking. Watch the movement of the rider. Usually start with kind of looking at pelvis and hip movement, back. I also, when I'm watching movement, see if anything attracts my eye of what's moving a lot or what's not moving at all. Also here, there was a specific change when the rider went to canter that is really indicative of a habit for security that we can see. And this is another one, and it can help us zone in on, okay, this is a thing that if this rider can change this, it's going to help everything else. It's going to help unlock more of that fluid movement. So what does anyone notice here? Yeah, Judith, left foot going in front of the girth. Alicia, yeah, there was a little bit of delay moving in frames. Okay, let me see if, just give me a moment here. I'll stop my screen share and I will pull it up another way. We'll see if it plays a little better. Okay, I'm gonna play it here. Let me know if this is playing more smooth. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'm just letting you watch and letting the comments come in. We'll watch through the whole video and then we'll break it down together. And I should have mentioned this at the very beginning, but I know that this is an awesome group in that we're all here to learn. We all know that we have made errors and we are all on a journey to improvement. So not here to judge anyone's riding. Very grateful to the riders that shared their videos that we could all look at together. Okay, so let's start to break it down a bit, because all the observations here are very accurate. So what we want to look at, because if we were working with this rider and we just said, bring your legs back, you've got to bring your legs back. How should she bring her legs back? And that's what often happens, is that, you know, the instructor sees something, they give a piece of advice, but if this rider was, okay, well, I got to keep my heels down, but now I've got to pull my leg back, what often happens is the rider will then tighten here through the back of the leg. So they'll contract the back of the leg in order to try to bring the lower leg back as they're still pushing on the stirrup. And that contraction will result in more limitation of the movement from the hip joint, the movement of the pelvis, more contraction through the back. And while they may be able to bring their leg back for a short bit, the movement of the horse, because the joints have not unlocked and maybe even gotten stiffer, the leg's going to swing forward again. So do a little movement with me now. If you're somewhere where you can, you know, prop up your phone, or you're watching on your computer and you can stand up, we're going to do a little movement. Remember that anytime that we simulate movement and we're on our own 2 feet, not sitting, especially not sitting on a saddle, it's going to be different. But we can still take some concepts from, you know, doing these movements together, and we can apply them. So what I want you to do is imagine if you were riding and put the weight in your heels. Okay, so to do this, you're probably going to need to kind of pull your feet up a little bit. Think about sinking your weight into your heels to bring your heels down. And we don't have a stirrup to press on, so again, it's different, but you can still try. Now, is anyone feeling here that your balance is a bit challenging when you do this? Is anyone noticing, like I'm noticing for myself, that I'm having to tighten through my upper back and I have to bring my weight forward in order to keep my balance? Because if I take my weight back when I don't have a saddle or anything there to catch me, and when I'm trying to take my heels, put my weight in my heels, then I go back. I also, stick with me again, do that one more time. Try to put the weight in your heels, getting your heels down, which means you got to kind of pull your toes up. Some instructors say this too. Oh, it's not heels down, it's pull your toes up. So you can try that. And what happens in your belly? What happens to your breathing? What happens to your feeling of being centered? It probably is not feeling so great, but we want to have some contrast. So we always want to try something else so that we can feel the difference. So now go ahead and just soften your feet, maybe take a few steps on the floor. I should have mentioned this. It's best if you do this barefoot. So you can try this again if you've got shoes on. Pull them off quickly now, or try it again later without your shoes on. Because now I want you to feel just rocking back a little on your feet, softening the bones of your feet. So like if you could just imagine your feet doing this, like splaying out a little bit on the ground. So softening your feet, and now soften your knees, keeping in alignment. So you want, for this exercise, since we're just standing here, we're finding alignment by having our feet underneath of our hips. So that allows us to soften our knees, going forward over our feet. And now here, what happens to your breathing? How do you feel in terms of being centered and balanced? Are you able to maybe relax a little bit more through your shoulders and through your upper body? So we just made, the comments are streaming in. I won't be able to probably go and catch up with all of them, but thank you for putting in the comments and playing along with me in that exercise so you can feel the difference between those two. So now I've got another exercise to do together to help to find, okay, how do we bring our leg back without that tightening? So the first thing is when we meet that stirrup, we want to have a feeling of that softening, just like we did with our feet here, softening the foot, almost like the foot was widening in the stirrup instead of pressing. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have this movement pattern that is really fundamental to being human. Does anyone know what that might be? If you've taken a clinic with Wendy, no cheating. No, no. If you've taken a clinic with Wendy, you know the answer. You can put it in. If you think about what we do in development of movement, is we start off crawling. So there's some interesting science there too of how you crawl laterally, bilaterally, etc. You start with crawling, and then you start hanging on to things with your hands, pushing or pulling with your hands and pushing with your feet to come up to a standing position. So what this does is it creates a really strong early motor pattern of we pull with our hands and we push with our feet. So then when we get in the saddle and we've got our feet in the stirrups and our hands on the reins, it's a very typical human movement when we need to find security to pull and to push. So one of the things that we do is, this is a little extra bonus tip, is we want to take the stirrup slightly behind the ball of the foot, very slightly behind, just so we don't have that same instinct to push as soon as we feel it. The other thing that we want to do is going to be our next exercise together. I'm just adjusting here so I can step back a bit farther. The other thing we want to do is we want to be really clear in the way that we're taking our leg back and the way that we're achieving this idea of heels down. Because there's a whole backstory and history on Caprilli and kind of how we ended up with, going from the leaning back position with the feet forward to bring the legs back, lower the heel, and have the forward seat jumping. There's a whole interesting history there. But it's not that heels down is necessarily wrong, it's how we do it. So it might be a little difficult to see my whole body from my webcam here, but I think you can play along. So imagine, again, that you were in the saddle. Soften one leg, so you're transferring all your weight to one leg. The other leg is soft, knee bent. And now I'm going to put this so you can see my foot. And now just let your heel first lengthen slightly back and down to the ground. Okay, so I've got my weight on this leg. I've got this leg knee bent. And I'm first just lengthening my heel down to the ground. So I've lengthened the back of my leg. I'm lowering my heel. If my leg was just totally relaxed, it would go into this kind of a position. So I'm slightly lengthening. I'm engaging a little bit of muscle that's here kind of underneath the big glutes, but it's a light engagement. And now from here, I'm just going to think about slightly, very slightly bringing my leg back and keeping this connection with the floor. So can you feel how the back of your leg is lengthening here? And can you feel how that's different than if I'm here and I've got my heel down and now I try to bring my leg back, how that's tightening. Play with this the next time that you are riding, because this is a really key distinction and difference. And Lynn said, my position is so much better when I ride without stirrups. You're not alone, Lynn. It's about learning how to relate and connect to that stirrup that you don't trigger that bracing response. And you can absolutely do it, but that's the key. Okay, so I want to move on to the rest of it because we're only on point number 1 and we're a little over halfway through our hour together. But you can see how if this rider was able to do that, a lot of the other things up through her body would resolve themselves. And she wouldn't have to think about, okay, I've got to change my upper body and I've got to do this with my hands and I've got to stop leaning. Because when we've got a good base of support, when we don't block the movement, and when we find that one crucial thing, the rest of the problems can usually go away on their own. All right, so let me come out of the screen share, go back to our presentation together. Okay, I'm just gonna skip ahead to this one. I wanna make sure we get to our other exercises and watch some of the other videos. So I'm gonna skip one video. Maybe we'll watch it another week. All right. A key point here is whenever we are doing something, I always remember Wendy saying, can you do it with half of the effort? So for example, that exercise that we just did of softly lengthening the back of the leg to lower the heel to the floor, can you do that with half the effort? Now, can you do that with 1/10 of the effort? So we're exploring, and this is part of good quality movement. There was another book by Todd Hargrove, who was another Feldenkrais practitioner. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially the key to good movement is slowly taking away all of the excess. And that's what we do when we think about less effort. So the less that we have mobilizing muscle engagement, the more stability that we will have. That's really key. Think about that. Anytime you make a big movement and a big tension, the less mobilizing engagement we have, the more stability. The more that we're using big mobilizing muscles, the less stability, the less adjustment we're going to have in relation to that movement from the horse that's coming through. Okay, so we need to have a bridge from old to new. And we did that a little bit with the last one. We explored an old way. And you can tailor this to what is true for you in your riding of what's the old way, what's a new way that you're learning. So we did, okay, what if we're standing with lots of pressure in our heels? And now what if we change and we stand with our feet soft? Change, when you're actually practicing this, change back and forth several times because it will help you to map, okay, I'm in this position that I now understand is an old habit or it's not serving me. I want to go to this new movement and this new position. How do I get there? You're creating that bridge by repeating that change several times. So we're going to do another one here together. This one is going to help to access that movement that I shared from the beginning, helped me with that first lesson that I had with Wendy where we worked on the canter. Okay, so I want you first just to bring your awareness to your rib cage. We're going to do some things that are moving the rib cage. That's really what you want to feel is how is your rib cage moving through this? And the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to take your sternum forward. So we're standing here. You can do this sitting as well. but we're just going into a slight back bend. So you'll notice your gaze goes up, your chin lifts a little bit. That's fine. But think about starting the movement here with your sternum going forward. Okay, now we're going to do the opposite of that. So you're taking your sternum back and you're allowing the rest of your body to kind of follow this concave position. So your sternum goes back, your upper back is probably hollowing. You might feel your ribs are getting a little closer together in front. Now go between those a few times. Opening, going back. And now just find the center. And now just see if you can take your sternum slightly forward. And I've got my fingers here because it can really help to touch body parts where we want to bring more awareness there or more movement there. So just touching here, just think if you could take your fingers forward and let your sternum come forward. And as we do it this time, we're going to see, can we feel the movement with that little bit of effort, that 1/2 and then 1/10 of the effort, so that we're not going into a full back bend here. We're not tightening the back muscles to do this. We're just moving smaller in the rib cage. Okay, go ahead and just let that go. Now, who here has been told shoulders back, sit up, don't lean forward? Yes, Annette says yes. So it's another really common one that is often not understood very clearly. Because now I want you to think about what you do in the saddle when you hear shoulders back. So for many of us, we bring our shoulders back. So to do that, we've got to tighten the large back muscles. Notice for you where you feel that tightening. I feel it tightening down along my back. Automatically, when I pull my shoulders back, it puts my pelvis into a bit of an anterior tilt. It's subtle, but as I pull back here, it tilts my pelvis this way. Notice what it does for you. Do you feel, when you think about bringing your shoulders back, do you feel the same level of connection with your feet on the ground, whether you're sitting or standing? And what do you feel like your balance would be? So that was the old. Now let's do the new that we explored first. So now let all of that tension go and just see if you can find again your sternum going forward, and imagine that you were just slightly expanding your rib cage. If it helps to picture in your mind, you can picture, if you've ever seen those classical riders, a lot of them were big-chested men. So their anatomy gave them a bit of an advantage here in that they're got this really wide chest, kind of wide, round base of support. I want you to just picture that in your mind, because it's not only the anatomy, it's also how they carried themselves. So just think about that, expanding your chest, letting your sternum come forward. And how does that feel different now in the contact with your feet on the floor, in your breathing, and through the rest of your body? Awesome, Sally. Yes, supports the breathing. As we are doing these changes in our body, we come back to that very first thing we talked about, is how is it making you feel, in terms of, do you feel your nervous system spiking a little and saying, oh, this is uncomfortable? Do you feel your nervous system like you want to be like, that was actually Gray Molly, the yawning horse? You feel like Gray Molly, that you just want to take a yawn and a stretch because of the release of tension? We want to be moving towards those movements and those things that help us feel that that relaxation and that connectedness, because that's what's going to get us to that really connected way. Okay, let me see here. We're going to go back. Rudy brought in another good point of lift your head instead of shoulders back. Excellent. And this is, thank you for that, Rudy, because this goes right into the third point that I wanted to talk about. We want to be our own best teacher. So this is a direct quote from Wendy. And I can see this line of Wendy sharing it this way and how it came through her work with the Feldenkrais method and her work with Linda Tellington Jones, because I've found that all truly great teachers, they share information, they share their methods, they share exercises, but they're always encouraging the student to take that and to really make it their own. And when we do this for riding instruction, it helps us to adapt what we're hearing or what we're seeing into how we're really feeling in our body. So you may be lucky to work with an instructor who is a really good kinetic instructor that really helps you feel things. Maybe you're lucky enough to ride a horse that also really helps you feel correct things. But even if you aren't, this is how we can take some of that opportunity to help set ourselves up for more success in our learning. So, a really simple question is when you do something, when you do a position change, you just ask yourself, what feels better or worse? What do I notice in my body? So, instead of trying to just do something, I've been told I got to put my heels down, so I must not be getting them low enough. I'm going to push harder, or I know I need to sit back, so I'm just going to, I'm going to try harder to get in that position. If you listen to how the different changes that you make help you feel, it's like a guide to if you're on the right path. The second is, what do you need to learn? So this can be something, again, if you've got a really good guide, an instructor, the opportunity to get feedback from someone, whether it's in person, whether it's through, videos, we've got all this technology now, to get some feedback on, okay, what is the thing that's most important for me to focus on? An outside eye of what do you see in my position that I could improve? Or is that one thing for me? But you can also, even if you don't have that opportunity, is just ask yourself, what what is the one thing that I need to focus on? What am I hearing the most? There's a lot of really good riding instructors that may see what you need to do. They may see, okay, you're leaning forward. You got to sit up. But they may not have the tools, the vocabulary to help you really feel how to do that. But they're seeing the right thing. So that's where you can explore on your own. Okay, I know I've got to sit up. How can I do it in a way that actually makes me feel better instead of just trying it through more tension or effort? And then the last one is to trust yourself. And this one, I think, goes deeper than just the positions. It also is trusting yourself with um, the level of risk that you want to take. It's trusting when something doesn't feel good to you, even if someone or an expert, an instructor is telling you to do it. So, really trusting what's true for you because we've all got unique bodies, we've all got our unique experiences, past injuries, and the same rote advice, hands at the wither, for example, aren't going to work for everybody. So, the more that you can trust yourself when something doesn't feel right and look for another option. Two other really practical ways to do this would be ask for the explanation that you need. So, for example, if you're riding with an instructor and they're telling you something over and over, sometimes just saying, "Hey, I really want to make sure that I get this. Can you put my leg where you're seeing that it needs to be?" You can ask them, even if they're not normally hands on. You can ask them, or if you learn better visually, hey, am I really want to learn how to ride the canter better. Could I stay after my lesson and watch you schooling some horses so that I can see you riding and I can watch that? That can be a good opportunity too, because one way to know if you're with a good instructor is you should like the way they ride. If you watch them ride and it doesn't look good, more importantly, it doesn't feel good to you, then that's a sign that maybe you want to look for someone else. John said, yes, watching is so helpful. It, we all have different ways that we learn the best, and also the activity that we do. In this case, a movement based skill such as riding. It's so important to have that. That feel. Going back to that first point of riding is feeling. So the more that we can connect to that feel, then the better that we're going to be able to put those map dots on, put those darts in of, okay, that's that feeling. Now, can I get there even if I'm in trot, in canter, riding a new horse, riding in a different saddle, etc. All right, so I am just going to look through if we've got any questions here. So I want to do two things in the time that we've got left. First, I want to go through some questions if anybody's got that. And second is, if I've got your permission, I would love to tell you about the course with Wendy. And I already know from scrolling through and seeing names, we have some Effortless Rider course alumni in here. But the Effortless Riding course was actually the first course that I created with another instructor. And it was working from Wendy early on. There were a few years that I really wanted to do a course with Wendy, and I was honored when she agreed to do it and be the first outside instructor that that we did a course with. So if it's all right, I will tell you some about that. But let me just scroll here. Okay, Linda said, does shoulders down make sense? Here's the thing with different phrases. When you hear the phrase, do the movement, and really notice, how are you interpreting the movement? What is your body doing? Because I've noticed this, and with different phrases, that some people will interpret those things differently. So if you do shoulders down and you tighten your lats in order to pull your shoulders down, that's going to add more tension. That could have a similar impact to the shoulders back. If shoulders down for you actually allows you to drop tension, then that phrase might work. And that's a really good point, because not only can you ask for the explanation you need, but you can also find the phrasing that works for you. And then you can use that, even just in your own mind, as a self cue when an instructor tells you something. So let's just stick with that leaning forward example. Your instructor says, hey, you're leaning forward, sit up, pull your shoulders back. And you think, sternum, expand my rib cage, breathe. And it'll bring you to that position that they were looking for, but in a way that then helps you feel really stable and confident there. Sally said, somewhat of a sway back and tend to sit like that. So Sally, by a sway back, do you mean that you are overarched through your back? Overarched in this way, like where your pelvis goes into a forward tilt, an interior tilt? Or are you referring to the opposite pattern where you get over rounded in your back? Yes, the first one. Okay. So Sally, for you, you don't want to try to pull yourself out of that position. That's another error that some people then make is, oh, it's a pelvic tilt. I've got to tighten my pelvis. Instead, it's thinking about making sure your back muscles are soft, making sure that the weight of your upper body and your shoulders and your head is aligned over your pelvis, exploring where that is for you. And when you've got that alignment of the weight, it's okay if you've got more natural curvature in your back. You don't want to try to pull yourself into a position. Again, it's much less about how it looks in the sense of checking a list. It's much more important how it feels in movement. And also, again, when you're watching, you can get a sense of that feel just by watching too. Okay, Diane said, Right now, I have 4 instructors, me, my husband, my dressage instructor, and my first riding instructor helping me. I am not lost. Amazing. My horse blew up on Sunday and left a clinic in tears, so I need to just learn to listen to me and my horse. Beautiful, Diane. Thank you for sharing that. I would say to get that partnership back, I personally would start with just spending some time with your horse outside of the riding. So, really kind of going back to the questions of how well do I know my horse? And if I'm just quiet with them in their pasture, observing, not asking anything, just starting with that and using that to build a foundation to move up from. And that's where Andrea is so brilliant in what she teaches in the Pure Liberty program is building that base of friendship and then taking that base of friendship, giving value to the horse, then being able to make requests, and then looking for how do I bring that same balance to the saddle, where I'm allowing my horse to ask for the things that they need, like, okay, I really need a stretch right now, or I need to slow down, versus asking for the things that we want. Of okay, I need you to carry yourself. I need you to step forward and finding that balance. Okay, I think we got one question that came. Ellen, yes. Sorry, you put that one in a while ago. Yes, recording will be available to rewatch. We always get these posted afterwards, just as soon as we can. Okay, is it all right if I jump in here and just talk a little bit about the effortless riding course? Do we have any effortless riding course alumni that are on? I'm going to pull up the slides again. Hi, Ree. Oh, we've got Catherine Vincent too. Great to see you guys. Okay, so I am going to go through the effortless rider course. Sometimes it's really fun. Those of you that are even alumni, if you've got the time to listen into this, because even myself, I created these programs, and when I go back and revisit them, for example, to create these slides, I think, oh, I forgot that we included this part. I've got to go back and watch that. I was thinking that with the equitips in the effortless rider course, where Wendy does all of those videos where she connects, okay, here's this body part on the horse, like here's, the stifle and how it relates to the human heel. And then you start relating that into the movement. Fascinating. So the Effortless Rider course is taught by Wendy. It's a step-by-step course to improve your riding with clear explanations and simple exercises and a lot that you can do at home. And that is for really good learning. That's the key marriage of having the concept, understanding the why. So we're fulfilling the desires of our analytical brain to understand, but then having the exercises to get the feeling and putting that dart on of, okay, this is the feeling I'm going for. And Wendy does a great job at having exercises where you can do that from even out of the saddle. So the course starts off with going over anatomy for riders. So really looking at our anatomy with her friend Elmer the skeleton, and understanding these different positional things and why they affect tension, balance, and how to, this is her expression, ride with your bones. And I think that actually came from Sally Swift, and that was the name that escaped me earlier. So Sally Swift of centered riding, Wendy worked very closely with her as well. I'm incredibly grateful to have had so many opportunities to learn with Wendy because she brings these lines of great instruction that she carries forward, as well as her own expertise. Okay, so the first one is all on anatomy. Module 2 is going into these riding mysteries. So looking at now the two skeletons together, we look at this with the real horses and riders too. But looking at, okay, now we're getting a picture for what is good movement. what are some of these mystery things, where our hands go, what we do with our seat, what is a good seat, and how to connect that. And then in module 3, we've got the unmounted exercises. And this is the module that is just packed full of what you can do at home, using an exercise ball. This picture is the mirror work, which is incredible, especially for if you've got an old injury that still reminds you sometimes, that bugs you a bit, or you've got an imbalance and asymmetry in your body. Mirror work is really excellent. So Wendy goes through all of that in the third module. Module 4 is riding demonstrations. In this one, you get to see Wendy riding with her own horse, Owl, and she really goes through these demonstrations so that you can visualize what those correct movements look like. And then in module 5, that's where we brought in several horses and riders, and you'll see how Wendy works with them and how she determines, like we did in a very short way today, looking at that first video of, okay, here's what's happening with a rider. And then you'll see the fixes that she does, and you can really relate that to things that you might feel in your own riding, and then more fixes to try there. This is the equitips. So with the course, you get those 5 modules. You'll also get the equitips, and the equitips come with each of those 5 modules where Wendy connects, okay, here's a key point of the horse's body, corresponding part of the rider's body, and why it matters in movement. And it's amazing, the more that we can build this, Dr. Peters has called it a scaffolding of knowledge. The more that we build kind of this conceptual understanding of what movement is, how our bones look and move within our body and our horse's body, just that understanding filters through to better movement. The more that we give ourselves this information, our bodies have this incredible sense of sometimes doing things on their own to help us create that feeling. It's really amazing. All right, we also put in, this is a full hour-long bonus of a Fixes Masterclass. Wendy is a master at having these really simple things, often with little tools that you even have, laying around your house, like a tennis ball or stretchy strap, or what were some of the other things we used? The mirror, these little things that help to create those feelings that you can use both out of the saddle and also in the saddle as well. So this was a master class just focused on her 5-minute fixes. And then we didn't go into this in today's webinar, but the way that the saddle fits has a huge impact not only on the horse, but also on the rider. Because if the rider doesn't fit us well, it can cause those issues like our leg going out in front of us, the leaning forward, the sometimes being thrown back, getting behind the movement. So being able to recognize, is this saddle supporting me or is it limiting me? Knowing some fixes that you can do, and also just being aware of that can save a lot of heartache of thinking it's something you're doing when really you're just fighting against your saddle. Has anyone experienced that? I know we've got someone, I remember talking about it through chats and through Q&As for this course, because it always comes up of someone realizing it's the saddle. You're able to correct some of that imbalance from the saddle, and it just makes a big difference. Okay, this is the bonus that we've got now. Again, if any alumni are on that might have joined before this was included, send us a message. We'll make sure that you've got access to this. We'll get you the link to it. It's the Feldenkrais for Riders class. So if anyone's not familiar with Feldenkrais, this is a style of work where you use gentle movements to bring more awareness to the body and to open new movement patterns, but without using, it's not about gaining strength or mobility through effort. It's about doing these really subtle movements and it reprograms the nervous system because so much of what allows movement or limits movement, it's not necessarily the length of our muscles, the length of the tendons, the strength of the muscle. It's what the nervous system allows that body part, that body system to do and to express. So anytime that we're doing movement, and we're going to talk about this more next week because we're focusing on movement next week, is we've got to balance the two of we need to make sure that we're doing things that allow our nervous system to feel these expanded movements. And then we've got to do some exercise to build up that resilience that we can support those, that we can support, more duration, more repetitions, etc. But in this Feldenkrais for Riders class, this one you do comfort of your home, lying on the floor. It's so relaxing. And Wendy guides you through a 30-minute class that will help with some of these most common challenges, specifically in opening the upper body. And it's a class that guaranteed you're going to want to come back to. Okay, so just to recap it again, there's 5 main modules: anatomy for equestrian, riding mysteries, explained, developing feel and communication, improving your horse's movement. Module 5, body and mind in sync. This was watching different riders. Whoops. And then the equitips that went through each of those. And wouldn't it be great to even have module 3 where you've got those exercises to do at home? Because 5 minutes, something that you could do in 5 minutes, think about if 5 minutes could improve how you feel in the saddle. So then we put in bonuses. The one that's available right now is the Feldenkrais for Riders. Video coaching, this is a really big one, and I actually forgot to put it in earlier. So with the Effortless Rider course, you can submit 2 videos of your riding and get Wendy's direct feedback on your position, your balance, and how to improve your riding. So this one is super high value in that it will help you find that one thing of, okay, you can send in your video. I suggest sending one almost as soon as you start because you can get that, okay, focus on this. And then you'll have that to focus on as you go through the unmounted exercises, the fixes masterclass, even the equitips. You'll have that thing that you're focusing on. And then if you get to a place where you feel stuck, you can send in the other one and get Wendy's feedback on that. And then we've got the saddle fitting module as well to learn how to do a basic assessment if your saddle fits you and your horse. And everything that's included here, we've got 2 options for Effortless Riding course: $795, which is a single payment, or you can do 6 payments of $135. And I will put the link here in the chat. I always forget to put this in so that you can follow along. But I'll put this in. You can save this link and it's not copying and pasting. Let me try it again. You can save this, and I will also send it out when I send the email with the recording. So you'll have it there as well. There it is. And Terry, yes, if you can't find the Feldenkrais bonus is added to the Effortless Riding course portal. But if you don't see it in there for any reason, if you can't find it, just send an email and Catherine will send you the link to that. Any other questions? If you've got any other questions on the course, you can absolutely send us an email. You can always reach us at info@horseclass.com. I'm just catching up on some of the chat here. Kim, it was great to meet you as well. Yeah, we have others that have shared those not great fitting saddle experiences. Josie and Beverly. Yes, it can be an expensive lesson when the saddle fits the horse, but not us. Because in the end, if it doesn't fit us and we're not riding well, just like my experience that I shared with Molly, even just putting us a little out of balance affects the horse in such a big way. All right, great to have everyone here. I will. Yes, Helen, if you're a member of Effortless Riding, if you've joined in the past, you've got lifetime access. So look for it in your library. You can either go to horseclass.com and just look for the library there, and click on that. That'll give you the login. And again, if you ever need any help finding programs that you've got, just send us an email. Catherine on our team. I know many of you know Catherine. She's amazing and she gets stuff over as quickly as possible. I'm out with the horses and she helps out with sending links. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thrilled to have you here. Thanks for joining me. And I will see you next week. Our focus next week is going to be on movement, and we'll be going through a kind of a mini class on spine health. So I'm really looking forward to that. So show up next week, ready to move. Bye for now.